God made mankind after his own image and likeness, and put him in paradise, that was a land of bliss, and gave him that land to have he wanted therein evermore. And never till then he did so that he were bound to him, and did what he bade him, and kept truly to his heste, as he was a holder be poor kind. For man ne had nothing of himself, but all thing that he had, it was of God giving, both his own being and his wanting, and all thing that him needed God granted him, and forbade him nothing, but that he ne should not eaten of a tree that was amid his paradise, that was issued a tree of knowing both good and evil. For God behichted him certain, that what day he ate of this tree he should be dead, and of all the other tree of paradise God gave him lever to eat. And for man ne should not been alone in this bliss, he made of man a woman to be his helper, and to be partner of this bliss, and said that she should be his wife. God made also the kind angels, and put him in the bliss of heaven, and among him he made on more wise brichter and fire, and more of micht than his fellows were, and called him Lucifer. He beheld himself so fire, so michty, and so wise, and ne thought not how his God had he made him so of nacht, to ben in all that bliss, in the dagger of a servant, to worship in his God as a true servant should, and of his finest he fell into a pride, and said in his thought, He will set him in siege in the north, and will believe him that is highest in heavens. And many angels that were in heaven ascended to this thought of pride that Lucifer had conceived, and God showed him what he was, and by whom he was mad of nacht. And though Lucifer knew himself, and knew his trespass that had he done against his God, he fell down for his bliss of heaven into the deepest sorrow and pain of hell. That was a despair of sorrowness of his sin that he had done against his God. And all the angels that ascended into him fell down for the bliss of heaven into the pains of hell. But not all a liedje deep. For those that were highest in bliss, after the doing of her trespass, they were deepest in pain. For all her wisdom, her micht, and her brightness, that increased her bliss, after they had sinned, increased her pain, and the greatest pain that his had was despair of forgiveness of her sin. For when they knew how God had made him of nacht in so perfect kind as they were made, and he put him in bliss to have evermore dwelled therein, and they of her own daughters inkindlicher forsaken her God, and worshipped another as God, that God had made of nacht, they fell into sorrow for this trespass, and thochten her trespass so great, that him thought God ne michten not forgiven him her trespass, and so they fell into despair of forgiveness. And that despair is the deep pit of hell, in the which lieth Lucifer, and many other of his fellows that fell in with him from heaven. And though Lucifer was a fall from bliss into pain, he had enved mankind that wandered in paradise, and thought he would make man leave the bliss of paradise, as for his pride had he loved the bliss of heaven. And so he made himself in the likeness of an adder, and come to the woman that was more frail, more uncunning than was man, and said here, We God had forbidden him that they ne should not eat of all the trees that were in paradise. And the woman answered and said, We ate of the tree that be in paradise, but of the tree that is amid paradise we ne ate not, lest we die. Thus said the serpent, Nay, they shall ye, nocht for God. What well, that what they ye eaten that of her and children ben opened, and ye children ben as God is knowing both good and evil. And though the women say that it was a good tree to eaten of, and the fire and saying are likened to the sicht, and he ate thereof, and gave her husband thereof, and he ate thereof also, and though her eigen were opened, and they sign himself naked, and for sham they made him breeches of leaves to hiden him with their members, and they went in to hiden him in paradise from the sight of God. And though God clep Adam, and asked where him was, and Adam said, Lord, for that he was naked, he hid me from thy sight. And God said to he, who showed thee that thou wert naked? But for thou ate of the tree that is forbade thee, that thou shouldest eat thereof. And thou, said Adam, the woman that thou gave me to my fellow gave me of the tree, and ate thereof. And God said to the woman, why didst thou thus? And he said, the adder beguiled me, and he ate thereof. And God said to the serpent, for thou hast done this, thou art accursed among all the beasts of the earth. And God said to the woman, ye will multiply the grievances and conceivings, and in sorrow thou shalt be. Bring forth the children, and under man's power thou shalt be, and he shall be thy Lord. And God said to Adam, for thou heard thy wife, and ate of the tree that he forbade thee. Accursed be the earth in thy work, in travail thou shalt eat of the earth all the days of thy life. Briars and thorns the earth shall bring of thee forth, and thou shalt eat in herbs of the earth. In sweat thou shalt eat thy bread, for till thou comest again into the land that thou art attacked out of. For powder thou art, and into the powder thou shalt be turned again. Though God clothed Adam and Eve in clothings of beasts' skins, and said to Adam, is he mad as one of us, knowing both good and evil? And therefore look he now, lest he take of the tree of life, and eat it, and live evermore. And though God put him out of the bliss of paradise to work in the earth, and set it before the paradise cherubim with a burning sword in his hand to keep the tree of life, and though Adam knew his wife, and he conceived, and brought forth a child, that they kept in Cain, and after him he brought forth another child, and him they kept in Abel. And so, in the process of time, thus coming of Adam and of his wife, mortal people in the world. Both they drew into wickedness, and lived in goodness, and God said that man had drawn him to wickedness in the land of bliss, and also in the world that was a land of travail and of pain. Said him it thought that he had a mad man, and for her sin he thought to take vengeance on him, and make an end of mankind. And so he sent a great flood, and drained the world, and all the men that were in the world, save Noah and his wife and Noah's sheep, that God bade him maken ere than the flood come. And though God say the friends of men, he behichte that he ne wilde not take a swilche vengeance no more on man by floods of water, and in token of this, between him and man, he put his rainbow in the clouds of heaven, on the string toward the earth, in token of peace between him and man. For before that flood was there never rainbow in a scene. Saith every man is he held by Christi's law of charity to love his brother as himself. He that han of God's grace more knowing than we, han that bet loud and uncunninge, bet he hold to teaching us things that bet needful to the halo of our souls. That is to say, what thing is pleasing unto God, and what displeaseth him also. And he pray how pure charity to teaching us loved men trouwliche the south after ure axinge. Brother, ik know well that I am hold by Christus law to perform the axinge, but natheless we bet now so fair I fallen away from Christus law, that it wold answer to the axinges, I must in case underfange the death, and thou wast well that a man is holden to keep his life as long as he may, and prayant is that it is spadefull to hold an ure pacey while, till that God fucheth safe that his will be knowe. For now the world is full of wickedness, and men have more desire to live in her fleshliche lusts than in sin to the pleasing God. In forsaking sin, And Isaiah is certain that community of this world hath forsaken God and his hastes, and heard false goddess, and that is to all mankind the great matter of sorrow, and to send the great love that God hath showed to mankind, and to send on overseer, who little we loved him achenward. Leve brother, each trowe full well that the world liveth in much wickedness of sinne, but it trowe that many men if they knewen how they might pleasen their God, they ne wolden not sparen for dread of no man, ne for love nor that done thing that were to his pleasing. And ye trowe that our God be so good and so merciful, that if we acknowledge unto him our sins, and forthinketh our trespass, and ben in full will to offending him no more, that hope is that he will forgiven us our trespass, if we act in mercy. For so he sent by Ezekiel the prophet, and also by David in the Psalter, and by Jeremy also. And Christ said also, that he ne willen neucht as sinful as man is death, but that he be turned from his sin and live. And our hope is that evermore his grace is ready to him that accepteth his grace, and putteth in him all our trust. And he trowe that he wolde that men wisten who they shoulden pleasen him, for he sent his Son, that was his wisdom, adown into the world, to teach in mankind who they shoulden pleasen his Father. But it trowe for men weren't to worldliche, they ne hadden no savour in his teaching, and he trowe full well that for men hath he trust more in her wisdom than in God's wisdom. Therefore God hath led him so long he worked, that we beth through her wisdom he fallen into sin, that we mote knowen well that man's wisdom ne is but folly. For it trowe that very wisdom be to dread God, and very understanding to gone away from sin, and so saith Job. But he saith that this wisdom ne is naught found in the land of men that live softly, and it trowe that if we turn to God in all our heart, then he will be funden of us, as he saith by Jeremy his prophet. And he belowe well that for love that he hath to mankind, he will bring us out of this mischief of sin, if we desireth it, with full heart and trowe. Nay, we should not dread the multitude of our enemies, they her michten no hear the wisdom, if our God will ben our help. For he is mighty without an end, his wisdom is endless, his love and his mercy is evermore ready to him that clappeth him to in his succour in her tribulation. And so we ourselves beth the enchison of the mischief that we beth fallen in, and if he saith us desire and help, he ne wolde not failen us at our great need. And brother, be thou seeker that the knowing that thou hast of the mischiefs of the world is unleash of God's grace, and naught of the desiring, and the rede that thou ne hide it not from us, that fine walden it knowen him, and the men ours liefes, lest thou be holden a false servant to God in the day of doom, for hating of the Lord's treasure that thou shouldest jafar, with to increase the Lord's treasure, and who that is false in little well, he taken thing that is of greater value, and God that is a rightful Lord will throw in his unprofitable servants in the day of her accounts in his dark prison of hell, when his profitable servants that had increased the goods that they had to keep should be put in more worshipful office in the place of heaven, on whom micht thou sayest that thou art in charity that have plenty of goods in the keeping, and sayest us that bending brethren in peril of death of soul for default of swelche goods, and thou closeth in a worthiness from that thing that though thou depart with us of the treasure thou shalt rather win than less. And this ne is none so covetous a man of the world's gods, that he ne wolde bethelige geven his gods to needy men if he hoped to win in his geving. Ne thou, ne shouldest not spare for dread of the death, to telling us the truth, to bring us of mischief of the death of our soul. For in the Old Testament the children of Israel put himself in peril of death, to bring her brethren out of bodily mischiefs. Our Lord God also put himself in peril of death, and undergone the death, to bring us that were his servants out of mischief of sinner. And if our Lord put his soul for his servants, it is skilful that one brother put his soul for his brethren. For that apart that law of charity that Christ taught here on earth, both in word and deed, and think how Christ saith, that who that loveth his father and his mother, his wife, or his own life above him, he is not worthy to him. And who that loveth his life in this world, he shall lessen his life. And say that thou sayest that the people hath forsaken God in his hasts, and worshipping false gods, it must follow needliche that God is much unworshipped. And then, if thou lovest God over all other things, thou must be about to increase in his worship, in drawing thee brethren from sin, and teaching him who they shall please God in keeping his hasts. And brother, I pray thee, for the love that thou shouldst have to God and to thy brethren, that thou answer truly to things that he will ask in thee, to hell of my soul, and of other men's souls, that he louder than thou art. And if thou nay wilt not, our the hope is that God will inform us by some other true servant of his. And we prayeth him to dame the recht between us, and in the dreadful day of doom, but if thou truly. Brother, thou hast agast me somewhat with thine arguments, for though thou ne have necht ben among clerks at school, the skills that thou makest bet thee founded in love that is above reason, the clerks used in school, and therefore it is hard for me to understand the scales and in axings, for the argument of love made God to make the world of nacht, and man after his own likeness, and to put him in paradise, to have any wanted there in bliss ever without an end, so that man would keep in his hasts. And when man hath broken the haste of his God through the temptation of the devil, he was worthy by the argument of reason to have he loved his country ever without an end for so great a trespass. But a love made an argument for man, and put him out of his country under the power of the devil in the world, to chasten him for his trespass, and afterward to bring him out of the devil's thraldom into his own country. And this was a strong argument of love. And so God that time, when he saw man even fairly fall into the devil's thraldom, he chose him a people that were in Israel's children, to teach him who they should come again to her country, that was her kin heritage out of the thraldom, that they weren't fallen in their sin, but for as much as man was that time uncunning, unmächtig, that had a man in his thraldom, God taught a man a lesson to dread him over all other things, and forsaken all false gods. And for these children of Israel should perfectly to know in her lesson, he suffered him ben in great thraldom under Pharaoh, that was king of Egypt. And though they cried unto God that he should bring him out of thraldom, and he for love heard her crying, and saw her tribulation, and sent to Moses his servant, and Aaron his brother, to bring him out of Egypt toward her own country. And for they should know that there was no God but he hardened Pharaoh's heart, that was king of Egypt, that he ne would not deliver his people out of his thraldom, but be micht out so strength. And so God did wonders and marvels in Egypt before Pharaoh, that none other God ne micht do to show in his micht. And afterward he led him out of Egypt by a wilderness, and bade him they ne should not threaten her enemies, for he would fight for him, eigen her enemies. And so Pharaoh was wroth that the children of Israel were passing out of the service, and took his host, and pursued God's people into the desert, to have he brought him again into Egypt. And though God led his people over the sea without a ship, for he made him away in the sea, and made the water in both half of him stonden upricht as walls, and they passed in over dwege. And Pharaoh come after him in the same way, and he was drowned in the sea, and all his host with him. And though he led him into the desert, and gave him a law by Moses his servant, and he wrote himself 10 hastes of his law in 2 tablets of stone, in talking it, that his people's hearts were that team hard as stones. This law was a law of dread, to teaching him dreading him over all other things, and bad him keeping his law when they coming into her country, that he had by hotting smit me. For he found him a true servant, and they kept in his hestes, he begichtte him, that alle her enemies on every side should dread him, and be servants to him. He bade him that he should not dread the power of her enemies, for he himself wilde fichte for him, and ben chief retain of her ost. And so God led him into the land of behest. Thus, through an argument of love, God Almighty durch his micht delivered his people out of bodily thraldom, and brought him into a plenteous country, of all things that him beheaded to their bodily lieferde. And so nearly I am his servant, and the brother must grant in argument of love, and perform it in actions by me power. For the love hath overcome me reason, and therefore ask now what thou will. Brother, I thank jou of jouw gode wille, and God continue jou therein, and increase jouw koningen to answer to mijn actions. Instead gij han jouw own free wille, he told me of this Old Testament, to how God brought his people out of thraldom. I pray you that he tell me what manner law he have people to pleasing him be, and whom he ordained to teach in his people the law, and whether the people kept in his law, while as they were in wilderness, other now dead, and tell me also how long they lived in wilderness, ere than he brought him into the long that he had beholden him. Sister, God let his people be seeds the hill of Sinan, that is in desert between Egypt and her own country. And there he made the people to dwell in besides the hill, and he talked to him into the hill, Moses his servant, and said to this, Thou shalt say to the children of Israel, Gij selven han say, what ye have do to men of Egypt, and hoe ye have bore you upon English wings, and take you to myself, and geef ye kepen mijn hests, gij zullen ben my people of all the peoples. Thus, when Moses spake to the people, and they answered that they woulden to all the things that God bade them do, and God said, If they woulden ben his people, and kepen his hests, he woulden ben her God, and bring him to her country. And the people assented and said that they woulden, but they bade God, that he would speak to him be Moses his servant, what were his will, and they nolden done all the things that he bade him. For they said, If God spake to him, they michten not live for the dreadfulness of his speech, woulden make him die. Though Moses wrote her law, as God had bidden him, who they children live in virgin with other, and if they breaken the law, he ordained Thomas to damn him after her quantity of her trespass. God also had chosen him, the kindred of Levi, to be his servants in the tabernacle, both night and day, and of that kindred he chose him Aaron and his children to be his priests in the tabernacle, to offer sacrifices to hearing of their God, and also for the people's sin. And these children of Levi, in principal each of the priests, were ordained to teach the people the ceremonies of God's law. And when Moses had taught the people the dumbness of God's law, God bade him come into the hill Achan to him, and he wilde given him 2 tablets of stone, and his law and his mandaments, that he should teach the children of Israel. And Moses went up into the hill, and was there 40 days and 40 nights, and learned the God's law, and learned how he should make a tabernacle to harry and in hear God, and how the priests should ben arrayed when they should sacrifice to hear God, and how they should ben mad priests, also what man ought they should honor hear sacrifices. And when the people said that Moses was long in the hill, they come unto Aaron his brother, and said, Rise up, and make to us gods that gone before us, for we wetted not what is befallen to Moses that brought us out of Egypt. Though Aaron took gold and threw it into the fire, and when it was molten, they cast it into a former, and made thereof the likeness of a calf. And though they said, This is the God Israel that brought thee out of Egypt, and harry this calf as for her God. Thus said God to Moses, Go down, for the people hath sinned, and ben go from the way that thou toughtest him. For they had made him a calf to her God. Unto him they done sacrifice, and saying, Israel, this beth the goddess that brought thee out of Egypt. Suffer me that I take vengeance upon him in this desert. Though Moses prayed to God that he took no such vengeance on his people, lest the men of Egypt boldly say that had he led him into Hellas to slay him there and destroy him. And so God was pleased by Moses' prayer. And Moses went down with the tablets in his hand that God had written in his 10 hestes. And when he saw who the people sungen and made much mirth before the calf of God, for that he threw the 2 tablets out of his hand and brake him. And though Moses bade that silk that were on God's health should have been joined to him. And so the children of Levi come unto him, and Moses bade him yard him with her swords, and gone throughout her brethren, and slain all the dealer that they met with. And so they did, and slowen of her brethren. And thus said Moses, He had hallowed your hand today in slaying her brethren. And though Moses went to God to pray in him for his people, and prayed God other that he should forgive the people her trespass, other else do him out of the book that he had written him in. And God said, Who that doth sin, each well done him out of my book. In the day of vengeance each well visited this sin of my people. And so God slew many of his people, for they heard this calf. Though God bade Moses that he should take the people and lead him to the land that he had begotten him. And he said, He knelt that God with the for is say well that this people is of an hard head, lest he destroy him in the way thitherward. Though the people made much sorrow, and Moses said to God, Lord, thou biddest me that he should lead in hence the people, and thou tellest me not when thou wast sent with me. And thou saidest that thou knew me by name, and that each had found grace before thee. Lord, if each have found grace for thee, show me thy face, and behold the people. And God said to Moses, My face shall go before thee, and each will give thee rest. And thus said Moses, If thou thyself ne wilt not gone before us, ne lead thou us not herein us. For how now we know that we han found grace before thee, but if thou walk with us in our way? Thus said God to Moses, Each well done that thou desirest, for thou hast found grace before me. Thus said Moses, Each have found grace before me, show me thy bliss. And thus said God, That may no man see me unleaven, but thou shalt stand upon a stone. And when that my bliss passeth by thee, it will put thee in the hole of the stone, and there it will keep thee for to that it passeth forth, and there thou shalt send the hinder parts of me. But my face thou not seen, and afterward make the 2 stones leach the other that be broken, and it will written in him that was written in the other tablets that be broken. And so Moses did, and went up again into the hill, and was there 40 days and 40 nights, and he ate no bread, no drank no water. And in the stones he wrote words of the forward that was between God and his people, and these were in the tablets of testimony of God's testament. And when he come down to the people, he told him the words that God had spoke to him, but that come a licht out of his face, in form of 2 horns, that the people was aghast to speak with him, but if his face were an irrever. Though Moses bade the people bring gold and silver and timber and other things that were needful to making of the tabernacle that they should inherit in her God, and also to make the ark of the bond that was between God and man, in the which he led to lay the way tablets of his law, and sought people geven willfully to the making of the tabernacle, all thing that behovet thereto, untilke that God gaf wit to worken every man of him rochte to make the tabernacle after Moses' ordinance, to making it complete, and when it was made with all his apparel, a cloud covered the tabernacle with out and forth, and the bliss of God filled the tabernacle kell within a forth. And when the tabernacle was immoved, the cloud moved him therewith, and when it stood still, the cloud stood still therewith, and reckoned it by day. And at night a pillar of fire was above the tabernacle, and so the children of Israel michten by day he witte where the tabernacle were by sicht of the cloud, and by night by sicht of the fire. And only Aaron and his children were ordained to be priests in this tabernacle, to do sacrifice to hear God. The other children of Levi served in the tabernacle to the priests, and kept in the gods that were in the tabernacle. And when the children of Israel would remove from one place to another place, then the children of Levi must take adorn the tabernacle, and keep the parties thereof in her ward. And when they were going toward a place that they would abide at, then some of the children of Levi should bear the ark before him, till they come unto that place, and then they should rever up the tabernacle again. And the children of Levi should lie in the four sides of the tabernacle, to keep in it both by night and by day. Brother, the 10 heads God law that he wrought in the tablets of stone, he knowe somewhat, he thank God, but he knowe not the domes of his law, and therefore he pray thee, ere than thou pass any further, tell me some of his domes. Sister, the great dome of his law was that such harm as a man did to his brother, such a harm they shouldn't suffer himself. As if he slew his brother, he should have been slain. If he maimed his brother, he shouldn't have the same maim. If he brand his brother, he should be brand in the silver wise. If a man forsake his God, other cursed his God, other made him any moment his likeness of his God, and worshippeth, that he should be dead. Also, who that curseth his father or his mother should be dead. And who that breaketh the holiday that was ycleped the Sabbath should be dead. And who that breaketh spousehood, other man, other woman, should be dead. And who that lay with a beast, other man, other woman, should be dead. And who that doeth the sin of sodomites should be dead. Who that stole his brother and sold him to other misbelieved men into thraldom and service should be dead. And who that staleth his brother's cattle, he should not be dead, but he should held his brother his cattle again, other as much thereof, a quantity moreover, as the double or the treble or the fourth so much. And if he have naught whereof to make good for his trespass, he shall be sold. And if one brother brought his brother to be his servant on his trial, he should have him to his servant 6 years. On the 7th year he should let his brother go out of his service, in freedom, if he wolde. Or if his brother liked well his service, and nolde not departing from his, then he should be his servant for ever. But not let his brother ne should naught putten into great thraldom, but do by him as by an huringe man. And if on a man had he trespassed against the law, men should don him the rechtfulness of the law, and ne sparen him naught, where he poor or the rich, and many others which domes God have to revel richly his people. Brother, thou sayest that God have his people ceremonies as well as hestes and domes. I praise thee, tell me what manner of ceremonies he ordained. Sister, God bade his people that they should have been holy and clean, for he himself was holy and clean. And therefore he forbade his people all unclean matters of flesh and matters. He forbade him all things bestes that hadden herefet departed at 2 parties or more. But if they chowed here cod, and so swin, and catters, and hundes, and switch other bestes weren't forbidden as for unclean bestes. Oxen, herders, sheep and get, and switch they shoulden eaten, for they were unclean bestes. Alle dylke beestes that han hold faith waren verboden, as horse and camels, for they bet unclean. Of fishes alle dylke that ne hadden natfinnes ne scales waren verboden, for they waren unclean. Other fishes they micht eten. Of breedesdicke that lived by raven waren verboden, as grapes and egles and gledes and switch other and alle volatiles that wenten on voere feit waren unclean and verboden. Also al the beasts that crepen on the earth waren verboden for her uncleanness. And who that toucheth any of these unclean beasts, when they weren dead, he should be unclean till even. And then he should wash in his clothes, and so he should be cleansed. And what vessel toucheth such carrinness of unclean beasts, within forth other clothes, other any such other thing, it shall be unclean till even. And afterward it shall be cleansed with water, and then it is clean. But if it be an earthen vessel, for it shall be broken, when any unclean thing hath the thrain. Also, all manner of storing and water in gistenes, other in petes, waren unclean. Also, all manner of flesh that water were thrown on was unclean. And who that toucheth the carrion of a clean beast, that death in some sickness, he should have been unclean till even. And who that eten of such carrion of birth it other anything thereof, these are but the ceremonies of unclean matters that maken men unclean. Every man that was leprous was unclean, and should be dumb of presses be he put out of the company of his brethren that were unclean. And when he were whole and clean of his lepra, he should show him to the priest, and the priest should offer unto God a sacrifice for his cleansing. What man toucheth a leprous man is unclean. What vessel of the clothing that a leprous man toucheth, it is unclean. And if it be an earthen vessel that he toucheth, it shall be broken. A man also that durch sickness hath the flux of his kind passing from him is unclean, till he be whole of his sickness. And all the time of his sickness, who that toucheth him should be unclean till even. And also, who that toucheth his bed, other sette, there he had a sette, should have been unclean till even. And if he were whole of his sickness, he should tell in 7 days from the time of his cleansing. And when he had washen all his body and his clothes in the running water, the 8th day he should come to the priest, and he should offer for him a sacrifice to God, and pray for him to God. Also both the men and women, after that they had lain together, they should been unclean till even. And then they should wash in her clothes and her bodies, and so they should been made clean. A woman that had purgation every month after the day of her purgation, she should be holden unclean 7 days afterward. And who that lay with her within that time should be unclean till even. And who that toucheth her bed also, and vessels that she toucheth within that time, should be unclean. A woman that had a flux of blood after her kinderliche purgation in the month was unclean, and who that toucheth her other her bed should be unclean till even. And after ceasing of her flux, she should count 7 days. On the 8th day she should come to the priest, and he should offer for her a sacrifice to God, and pray for her. A woman that had born a child, if it were a knave child, 7 days he should been clean. The 8th day he should circumcise her child, and 30 days should passen ere that he should come into the sanctuary without touching any hallowed thing. If it were a maid child that were born, the woman should have been unclean 2 weeks and 60 days, and 6 he should have been in her purgation, and after these days he should come to the priest, and he should offer unto God a sacrifice and pray for her. These be the ceremonies of clean men and unclean, and women also. They hadden also ceremonies of holidays, for the 6th day of the week they michten wertje, and the 7th day they shoulden ben in reste, both the husband and his wife, and his children, and his servants, and his bestes, and strangers also. For when God made the world, 6 days he wroughte, and the 7th day he was in reste. And who that the holiday he shoulde ben stoned to the death. The first month of the year, the 14th day of the month, pass of God the evited, that is to say, the passing of God, and on the morrowen they shoulden make a solemnity of their bread, and this day they shoulden resten from all bodily workes, and 7 days they shoulden eten their bread, and the 7th day shoulde be holy as the first. This God ordaineth for he shoulden haven in mind, hoch in the first month of Swister, 3 apostles that were most privy with Christ, Peter and James and John, readeth epistles to the people, who they shoulden live, and Peter saith on these wise,